to be very much an ODM insider during the 2013 election, and that was a past life. Those were your past allegiances. And at that time, you were infamous as part of a lobby group called Kikuyus for Change that campaigned against Uhuru Kenyatta at that time. Things changed later. Kenyatta wins. You go ahead to dump ODM, join Jubilee, get elected on a Jubilee party ticket. Why that change? What persuaded you from being, so positively against him to switching allegiances?
Learning. Life is a learning process. You don't know everything at every given time. And as you grow older, you learn stuff. And one of the things that had happened, when I was, actually Kikuyus for Change was not a lobby group for ODM. It was a lobby group that began in 2007, after the post-2007 elections.
Violence, right?
And it was meant, we were trying to push what we were calling positive ethnicity, because 2007 was a result of negative ethnicity. I've been a supporter of positive ethnicity for a long time. The fact that you need to accept that I am Kikuyu, but that doesn't mean that it stops you from being whatever you are. And it doesn't mean that I respect you any less. But this thing of trying to pretend we don't have cultural differences brings a lot of our problems. So I did Kikuyus for Change, and then because of how I had done it, I actually got approached by the Raila Odinga's presidential secretariat to work for them. So I went and became the political affairs director. Interestingly, I keep hearing people saying I was in ODM, but I worked in that presidential campaign for 11 months. I was not in ODM before, I was not in ODM after. Mm-hmm. I worked for 11 months for the presidential campaign. Mm-hmm. At the end of that election, in March 2013, I left. And I ran... You said
it's about learning. What did you learn?
I learned a couple of things. It was, when I started Kikuyus for Change, I was very idealistic. I actually believed it was possible for us to go beyond our ethnic divides and into that nationhood, Kenya identity that I thought was where we needed to be. When I joined ODM, I remember telling people, I walked into ODM a Kenyan, I walked out a Kikuyu. And
you walked into ODM a Kenyan?
I walked out a Kikuyu. Because now I was in a place where I assumed that we had all the other communities and we were all working together to be Kenyan. And I realized that even there, the ethnic identities were very stark. I had people there telling me, but when I'm Kikuyu, nafanya nini?
In ODM?
Yes. What are you doing here? And by the time that campaign was over, I was like, you know what? Whether we like it or not, we are going to have to fix where we are. And part of that was me leaving ODM and thinking I'm going to go into Central Province and I'm actually going to work in Central Province and try and get us to move into that next step. Because I had learned many things. I had learned how political campaigns are done. I had learned what other people think about us. Because part of the problem we have in Central Province, we don't move around a lot. So we don't interact as much with other communities. So you don't get to hear the opinions they have of you. Now, having been in ODM for those 11 months and gone down the country in a campaign trail, as a member of ODM, but as a Kikuyu, I got to hear what people were saying about Kikuyus. And I was like, I remember when I finished that campaign, I went and looked for a group that was called Mount Kenya Foundation. And I told them, guys, we have a problem. We have to figure out how we are going to create a platform for all of us to work in this country. Because the rest of the country seems to have a problem with Kikuyus. And that is the lesson I learned.
Is that platform created through constitutional change that creates a larger executive that can accommodate very deliberately leaders from different regions?
That was my proposal to the Building Bridges initiative when they came to Nyeri. Is that the only way that we can do this? I don't know. What I do know is that we must create a platform that creates an inclusive structure of government. Why? Because right now we have two positions. I don't know if you remember during the first term of Uhuru and Ruto, the biggest complaint that CORD then had before they became NASA was that this government belongs to two communities. And it was not really a realistic position because in the government we had cabinet secretaries from Nyanza, we had cabinet secretaries from Western, we had cabinet secretaries from Northeastern, we had people from all over the country. But because the president and the deputy president were Kikuyu and Kalenjin, it was actually easy to sell the narrative that the government belonged to two communities. Now, it didn't matter whether the president had been a Luo and the deputy president had been a Kamba, we would still have had the same narrative. So we are going to have to think seriously about how do we expand that perception that government belongs to only two communities.
And let's talk about how that initial handshake came about. Like you're rightly, well, you've not yet said, but what Jubilee pitched, or TNA and then Jubilee pitched, was that this handshake between President Kenyatta and the deputy president was about bringing communities together.
And it worked.
And it worked.
Yes.
Now you support the, Tanga Tanga, is it, would call the second handshake,
True.
which is between the president and Raila Odinga.
Yes.
And that is causing problems with the original handshake. Do you believe that the first one is no longer necessary?
I
Do you substitute one for the other?
No. The second one is a progression from the first one. The first handshake between William Ruto and Uhuru Kenyatta brought peace to the Rift Valley. It didn't do much to Nairobi. It didn't do anything to Mombasa. It didn't do anything to Western Province. So we actually had a situation where the Kikuyus and the Kalenjins in Rift Valley were now living harmoniously together, right? But the next time we had an election, we had violence in Nairobi, we had violence at the coast, we had violence in Western Province. So now the problem became, so it was quite clear that the first handshake, as much as it had worked within one province or one region, hadn't done much for the rest of the country.
Why does it appear then that the secondary handshake is happening at the expense of the first? Because the deputy president is clearly not comfortable with this arrangement. And we've even heard people talking about a quote-unquote handshake lineup, one that would ostensibly leave the deputy president and his supporters out of a political arrangement in 2022. Does this...
I think
is it simply not, are you not exchanging one for the other?
I think the reason the second handshake is becoming problematic, and it's becoming problematic to only those people who support the deputy president's presidential campaign for presidential bid for 2022. Why? Because to them, it levels the playing ground. It gives Raila another lease of life. It makes him, he was defeated. He had gone and sworn himself in as president, as the people's president, and it was finished. And the handshake just basically revived him and made him a political figure. And every time I've had this argument about this second handshake, I ask people, for a minute, imagine there's no election in 2022. Would you have a problem with the handshake? And nobody has a problem with the handshake outside the political ambitions of William Ruto.
Outside politics, but
actually outside
the reality is that it does have a political connotation.
Actually,
doesn't it?
The only political connotation it has is that it adversely affected, and that is the reality. It adversely affected the political ambition of William Ruto.
Would his supporters be right to feel betrayed after the president very clearly said, "Yangu kumi, yake kumi"?
That I hear that question all the time, and I keep asking, but the president hasn't finished his 10 years. How are we having a conversation about the next 10 years, and this first 10 years is not finished? Do you know? Look at it this way, Anne. When we began the 10 years, I was in ODM. Raila was an enemy of Uhuru Kenyatta. 7 years down the road, I'm a member of parliament of Jubilee. Raila Odinga is in a handshake and working very closely with Uhuru Kenyatta. If Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga can become friends, what stops Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto becoming enemies before 10 years are finished? So if they fell out before 10 years are finished, does that promise still hold?
And you have said that they have fallen out, that they do not have a working relationship.
They don't have a working relationship. I don't think they have gotten to the point where they are completely fallen out. But at this moment in time, I do not think any smart person would say they have a working relationship.
Would it then not be reasonable to conclude then that that support does not exist for the deputy president come 2022? And hence my question, wouldn't his supporters have a right to feel...
we haven't reached 2022. And that's why I'm saying it's not a good
It doesn't look like you're going to get there together, is my point.
It's entirely dependent on William Ruto.
What should William Ruto do?
This journey is not William Ruto's journey. This journey is not William Ruto and Uhuru Kenyatta's journey. This journey is Uhuru Kenyatta's journey. So if you want Uhuru Kenyatta's support, then you walk with him. You don't ask him to walk with you. He's the president. He's the one who's the buck stops with him. These 10 years are his. If William Ruto takes over, the other 10 years will be his. So you can't start saying that you're not supporting me. Supporting you to do what? What exactly does William Ruto want Uhuru Kenyatta to support him to do right now? What is he supposed to be doing? Right now, William Ruto is supposed to be supporting Uhuru Kenyatta to fight corruption, to implement the Big Four, to make the handshake a reality. What is he doing? He is undermining the fight against corruption by suggesting that it is political. It's a political witch hunt. He is undermining the handshake that his boss initiated. Because remember something, Anne, this handshake would not exist if Uhuru Kenyatta did not want it. Because as much as Raila might have wanted the handshake, it required Uhuru Kenyatta to actually give it life as president. So when you talk about this handshake, what you're saying is that Uhuru Kenyatta initiated a handshake with his primary opponent, Raila Odinga. Uhuru Kenyatta's principal assistant fights the handshake literally every single day. How would they be working together?
Okay. I just want to return to some of your earlier thoughts and how your political thinking has evolved over the years. And In an article in October 2012, you said that one of the reasons that you were supporting Raila Odinga then was, quote, because he was the only candidate who was not selling grievance politics or trying to manipulate ethnic fault lines and ring-fence communities away from other candidates. Yet today on this program, you admit and you say that our politics is essentially tribal, and you have gone on to talk about in a recent blog post that the Kikuyu community must be at the table of negotiating, and that the deputy president is trying to steal these votes before 2022. Does that whole line of reasoning and the sort of things that you have been perpetuating on social media, particularly about the Kikuyu community's vote, and that there needs to be some negotiation for them to sit at the table in 2022, why is that necessary in a system where we have devolution, where there are counties, where everybody gets resources regardless of whom they supported? And isn't it irresponsible of a leader of your caliber to be perpetuating that kind of politics?
Actually, all of us are perpetuating that kind of politics. So if anybody is going to get embarrassed, we have to get embarrassed, all of us. Why do I say
So
that?
are you personally embarrassed?
I wish we were not I wish this was not the kind of politics we do. Unfortunately, it is. It's a kind of, why do I say that? Recently, I watched the deputy president blasting Kutunyi and telling him that he's embarrassing the Kalenjins because he's gone out and he's fighting the Kalenjins. I listened to Cherargei, I listened to Kipchumba, I listened to Sudi. And the conversation you hear is, you guys are betraying us. Who is us? Remember, if William Ruto becomes president, he's going to become president by himself. It will not be the Kalenjin who are president. But there's already this feeling of, it is our presidency, it is our time. When
but
you
this
hear
is
tension,
exactly what you're saying about President Kenyatta's presidency coming from our region, coming from Central.
we have been
so you're doing the exact
Remember,
same thing.
This is Punchline. We have been as honest as possible here.
Yes, and I'm being honest that your kind of politics is frankly reprehensible, that it continues to perpetuate the feeling that the president belongs to a community and not to all Kenyans, and that somehow is there to safeguard the interests of a community and not all Kenyans.
No, the presidency does not belong to a community, but the president always comes from a community. And when the president comes from a community, our politics is such that once he comes from your community, you feel like you guys are in power, which is actually completely fake. It doesn't change how you eat, how you work, what business you do. But unfortunately, and that's why I keep saying it is very unfortunate, because that is the reality of our politics. We assume that once Ngunjiri is in office, then a Kikuyu is in office. It doesn't change anything. We have watched, forget about power, we've watched even the fight against corruption. We have watched the fight against Mau, for example. We've watched the issue about maize. And very many communities plant maize in this country. But every time you have a conversation about maize, the people who actually come to the front and talk about maize are members of the Kalenjin community. Right now, we have members of the Kalenjin community in the Mau forest. The people who are saying they should not leave the Mau forest are leaders from the Kalenjin community. This is a reality of our politics. Hopefully, one generation down the road or two generations down the road, we'll have changed this. But let's also be honest. Look at America. Trump was elected because he said we're going to kick people out of America. Look at Brexit. Look at the UK. This is unfortunate. This is a reality.
What are you saying, Ngunjiri? Are you saying this is the way we are going, and you're certainly not part of the solution, are you?
Global the world right now is going into an exclusionist political philosophy.
And you're not providing the solution here at home. For instance, on a program called Point Blank, you said, quote, the current political setup scares me to the point where I imagine giving full power to William Ruto in our current setting. No.
True.
Isn't that a very chauvinistic thing for a member of parliament to say, especially one who began his political career talking about change and, good governance and things like that? I actually still talk about it. And I believe how do both sit in your mouth? That change. But on the one hand, where you're willing to push this kind of that narrative is personal to William Ruto. Remember, William Ruto is an individual. When I talk about William Ruto as an individual. Why does he scare you? And why are you scared of giving him the powers that Because as far as I'm concerned, I think William Ruto is a smart politician without a conscience. He's a smart politician without a conscience? What makes you say that? Because to him, the end justifies the means. What proof do you have of that statement? Right now, he's running for presidency. And he's going to do anything he can to get to the presidency. What including undermining his boss, which is what he's doing right now. That scares me. Is this not fear-mongering? I don't know. I mean, it's my opinion. Whether it's fear-mongering, when I said I get scared, that's fear. It's me. It's personal to me.
I look at him, I look at how he's running his campaign, I look at the fact that we are 3 years, actually he started his campaign 4 years to an election. I look at the fact that his boss, who has been his friend, has pleaded with him publicly over and over again, told him, boss, we are with you in this thing. I haven't changed my mind about leaving you the presidency in 2022. Chill out. Help me get to my legacy. Help me finish my term. And then we are going to do the campaign. We were called in State House in 2017. And the president actually said it officially. You guys give me 4 years, dedicated service. 5th year, I will campaign for the deputy president. The deputy president is not willing to believe that. He's not willing to listen, or he doesn't believe the president at all. So he's decided he's making his own plan of how to become president.
Let's go on the war on corruption. And you've alleged that in some way the deputy president is fighting it. Do you have, though, any misgivings about the manner in which the DCI or the DPP are conducting themselves?
Actually, absolutely not. I think we, as a country, haven't understood what the fight against corruption is about. The fight against corruption is about criminalizing corruption. We come from a history where corruption is a moral issue, not a criminal issue. The people who are not corrupt is out of choice. I'm a Christian, so I'm not corrupt. It's not that corruption is a crime. In this country, we will never eradicate corruption, for example. I believe that. The same way we will never eradicate armed robbery, the same way we will never eradicate misdemeanors and petty crime. But the one thing Uhuru Kenyatta has done is to actually turn corruption into a crime. Before he started the fight against corruption, nobody actually thought of corruption being a crime. And that's why you saw people saying...
Surely that's not true. Everybody knew that it was wrong when they were looting public funds or rediverting them.
But what had happened?
The crime might not be called corruption, it would be called theft.
You see, Anne, what had happened to the people who were doing it? Nothing. You see, crime is crime because when you do it and you get caught, you get punished. If you're not getting punished, it is just a moral... It's wrong, yes, but it's not illegal. So what we were having...
it is illegal, but no one is enforcing the law.
Exactly. So what the president has done is created a structure that if you are caught in corruption, you will be punished. And what was the first reaction when he started doing it? You're targeting our people. It's like armed robbers being arrested, and because all of them are Kikuyu, I'm like, no, you can't have done that.
Well, we will know whether their guilt or lack of at the conclusion of a court process. But what is clear, though, is as you have said, that there is a history of not, prosecuting graft or reaching its logical conclusion. And last week on this program, the leader of the majority called for the implementation of the Kroll report. And as you're aware, that is the report that pointed out 130 billion shillings in assets suspected to be the proceeds of corruption during the Nyayo era had been stashed abroad. Do you agree that the war on corruption, which you have rightly said did not appear to start until President Kenyatta stepped up,
in this
should not only be current Kenyatta going forward, but should be relooking how this country has been managed, or is it mismanaged by previous governments?
The fight against corruption cannot be a philosophical issue. We can't start saying that at what point do we start fighting corruption. You start fighting corruption at the point you get it. You see, the
Does that not perpetuate then the thinking of that so you got away with it?
That's the problem. At what point do you imagine you got away with it? Because nobody did anything about it.
If you're not prosecuted, right?
Then do you start a prosecution? Remember what the president keeps saying. If you have a problem with someone, and he actually said, the people who are talking about the Kenyatta land, he said, look, if you think Askia stole land, walk to DCI. So the issue is, don't tell me to stop prosecuting Anne right now, sorry for using as an example, because Susan stole something 5 years ago. I'm going to deal with what I can deal with right now. And when I say we are politicizing this issue, we have people saying, why are you going after the guy who stole the one glove now, and you didn't catch the guy who stole the glass last week?
Right.
But we have to start somewhere. And if the guy who stole the glove is the one I saw, that's the guy I'm going to go after. We can't start having a philosophical conversation that's before.
No, not philosophically, but quite practically, because there is law enforcement agencies. There are existing reports of the government and of commissions that were commissioned by administration. So it's not philosophical at all. There is this data that is sitting out there. Should it be implemented? Should it be acted on?
It should be implemented. Whatever it is that can be done to fight corruption should be done. Now, Uhuru Kenyatta has decided to start here, right? We can't start attacking him for starting here by saying he should have started there. This is where he's decided to start from. And he's not going to be in power forever. If you get into office, you start from wherever you want. But let him do what he is doing, unless you're saying what he's doing is wrong. Because, Anne, this Nairobi, the number of people who are robbed in any single day, almost probably in the thousands. How many people actually get charged? The cases that get prosecuted, the cases that get reported, you have to get reported, you have to get, the police have to investigate and arrest someone to prosecute someone. That doesn't mean that the other people who've been robbed are not important. But you have to start somewhere. We can't say that we are going to kill the fight against corruption until we start from 1963. No, even start in 1963, that's fine. Build up a case. We have the option of private prosecution. Build up your case.
Okay.
Go to the DCI, go to the AG and say, I want to privately prosecute so-and-so for corruption.
So the people who are talking about it have the ability.
You have an option
to lead that fight.
It's not only government that can do it.
Fair enough. Let's just quickly touch on the Mau. In a recent interview, you know, you talked about the evictions of Kenyans from the Masai Mau, said they should continue. Do you think that these Kenyans should be resettled or compensated? What is the role of the state when it removes people from where they have settled? You know, the reason I'm going to say something that people don't like is because I come from Nyeri. Really? Are you going to start doing that? Yes, I come from Nyeri. I'm going to start that now. So in Nyeri, we have a forest called Kedeworo. We have Abadeas. We have Mount Kenya. Do you know people were kicked out of that forest a long time ago? Literally kicked out. And they were not living in the forest. They were just farming there. They were kicked out. They were told, you can't come here anymore. That was their only source of livelihood. And nobody ever had a fuss at the, oh, they need to be settled somewhere. Now, in Mau, I heard that 60,000 people live in the Mau. And that's a big number. But then, if they continue living in the Mau, they're going to affect the water tower that basically is going to affect 5-6 million people downstream. And I'm asking myself, so you want us to focus on the 60,000 people who could actually move out of the forest and adversely affect the 5-6 million people who need that forest to exist? Now, the Kalenjin leaders... Should they be compensated? For what? Why would I compensate you for moving into a forest you should not have been in the first place? If you have a title deed, for example, and you're actually able to prove that you believe this was a good transaction, then the person who sold you that land should be prosecuted. But you can't then charge the government for misdemeanors or mistakes or bad judgment or criminal activities of people before. And then say because somebody cut out a forest and sold it to somebody illegally, then the government is supposed to pay that person. Should they be resettled? Where? That's a conversation that the leadership should be saying. We have found land. Why don't you resettle them? What is the responsibility of a government, including in the cases that you've talked about in the Aberdare, etc., have to its people when it removes them for good or whatever reason from where they have made their dwelling? You see, first and foremost, by the time those people are going into the forest, they know they're doing the wrong thing. What happens is that politicians keep assuring them they will protect them. But the first people who went to the forest knew they were not supposed to be in the forest. And just gradually, for political purposes, people kept saying, don't worry, and just kept moving them into the forest. I will protect you. We will protect you. As your leaders, we will protect you. We'll ensure that you're not moved from here and taken somewhere, and without being taken somewhere else. That is the genesis of the problem in the Mau. There are those who will say there's a separation between the trust land and the larger forest complex. And what we are witnessing right now is an area where people were actually allowed to settle, where the president himself has campaigned, where the government has put in schools and other. So it's not just about according to them, it's not just about politicians, which you are right. Yes. They have said, stay, nobody's going to move you. Yes. But the government itself has put in these services there. When the president went Which government put up the schools? No, when the president, you see, I do CDF. If I go and build a school in a place, you can't tell me the government built a school. Remember, I have had people saying that Uhuru Kenyatta went for Harambee there. That was in 2009. He was not president. And that he campaigned there? Yes, I mean, we campaign everywhere. You should see me campaigning. I campaign in Majengo. I would campaign anywhere where there are people. Because you're looking for people to vote for you. You're going to campaign anywhere. I think assuming that because I went to a place where people are taking changa means that I support those people to do it is wrong. That's not right at all. We are out of time, and yet there's so much to talk about with you, Ngunjiri Wambugu. Should I open another topic, or should I let you deliver your punchline, perhaps? Okay, what do you want me to do? Deliver your punchline on whatever issue. I think it's important for us to understand. I have had this conversation that some of us are not going to come back in 2022. I keep hearing that, people saying, no, you continue fighting against the deputy president, you will not come back in 2022. Frank Fanon said that every generation must find its mission and either implement it, deliver on it, or fail. I think we are privileged
Those of us who are in parliament between 2017 and 2022 are privileged to be in parliament. And we're in parliament for this season. Whether we're going to come back in 2022 for 2020 up to 2027 is a different thing. It's our responsibility to deliver to the people of Kenya for this season without telling them how we are going to do what we are going to do in 2022. I think anybody, and I would like to urge every Kenyan, anybody who walks up to you to tell you about 2022, okay, I'm not going to tell you to punch them in the face, but really, that guy is taking you for granted. You just elected him 2 years ago, and he hasn't delivered half of what it is that he told you he was going to do in this season. Make sure, it's our responsibility to make sure every leader who you meet is only talking to you about now. What is he going to fix for you now? Not 2022. We don't even know whether we're going to be here in 2022.
And that's our time. Thank you for watching Punchline tonight. I am Ann Kiguta, back with you next Sunday. Good evening. God bless. Bye-bye.